For millennia, spiritual thinkers have offered wisdom and tools to help people find their way in trying times. Advice that even scientists like me find have a lot to offer. Join me, Dave DeSteno, as I talk to leading spiritual and scientific thinkers about everything from the ancient origins of belief to the power of prayer, even for atheists, to how spirituality can help the crisis of meaning men are facing today. Find our show, How God Works, wherever you listen to podcasts.
This is the final service. I'm Mateo Schimpf.
Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Mic check, 1, 2, 3.
We've spent the last 3 episodes in places far away from home. Northern New Mexico, Waterbury, Connecticut, Chicago. But this last story about churches that are closing and how the ones that manage to survive will keep their doors open, it takes place in our own backyard, right across the bay in Alameda County.
All right, we are in San Leandro, California, walking up to San Leandro Church of Christ Sunday morning service. It's almost 10 a.m.
San Leandro Church of Christ is a boxy beige building with a wide pitched roof. It sits prominently on a major urban arterial, MacArthur Boulevard, right across the street from a dim sum joint and an Easy Shop liquor store. You can hear a constant buzz from traffic peeling off the 580 interstate. I was told to look for double doors at the far end of the church parking lot. That would be the best place to duck in.
Walking in.
I was searching for a man named Woody Square. We'd spoken on the phone previously, and he was the one who invited me to this Sunday morning mass. But now, I was a bit lost, and sheepishly wandering the church halls. Luckily, a few good Samaritans saw my distress.
Hi. You hear us?
That's huge. Wait, can I touch it?
Woody told me this was a different kind of mass. Today, the kids would be in charge. They were poring over their notes in a room at the back of the church when they noticed me.
Hello.
Why is it so big?
Yeah.
What?
I can hear it seems staticky.
What's up, bro?
The big moment, as I understood it, was a rendition of the 10 Commandments, when God makes his reveal to Moses on Mount Sinai.
You guys feeling about it? You feeling good about it?
Yeah.
Baby. Everyone knows their lines?
They seemed a little distracted, so I returned to my search. I spotted Woody through a large window that faced out on the church pews and made a hasty exit.
Bye.
Okay, we're going in.
Hey, Mateo, Woody, man, good to see you.
Good to meet you.
Yeah, it's so funny. A couple of young adults said, "Who's that guy with the big microphone?"
Woody Square is the associate pastor at San Leandro Church of Christ. He's tall, thin, and remarkably good shape for someone going on 70.
You may be seated.
He's got a neat, military-style crop that's faded in at the sides. It's white, just like the goatee that frames his big smile. Calling Woody the associate pastor feels like a bit of an undersell. He's also the youth and family minister, and from everything I've gathered, he's really the heartbeat of San Leandro Church of Christ.
We ask for your guidance and for your strength as we strive to be role models, as we strive to be parents, as we strive to be mentors who are godly.
I hope so. Maybe I need to go around back? Oh God, I'm lost.
Woody's lived in a small bungalow-style house at the edge of the church parking lot for more than 30 years. He invited me over after Mass so we could talk about what I was really there for. That's the story of a congregation that was facing a big decision. Close the doors or fight to survive.
We have no idea what we said back then.
Okay. Well, can you introduce yourselves again to me?
Sure.
Woody and his wife Judy, they're kind of a package deal. They both grew up in Northern California, but didn't start dating until college, at a small Christian school in Arkansas called Harding University.
She knew everyone at the party, but I did not know her. So when she came through the door, I'm like, this person looks interesting. I don't know her, but I want to meet her. But as she went around the group, she kept getting one person ahead of me, so I would surreptitiously kind of walk kind of nearer, but then she'd move on to another person. Then she'd move on, and finally I just gave up, sat down on the couch, and then eventually she sat right next to me. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I was working too hard.
Spiritually speaking, Woody was a bit of a late bloomer. He didn't start going to church until he was 16.
And my mother woke up one day and said, we're going to church. I think my mom, I don't know, maybe felt guilty that we've gotten older and hadn't gone to church at all. We all got dressed, and a couple of us really complained. I didn't complain all that much. I'll just be honest, I'm a mama's boy.
To make mom happy, Woody started going to Bible class. Said he'd even do the Bible lessons 2 or 3 days ahead of time. And by the time he got to Arkansas, Woody was really into church.
What was the thing that you found attractive about ministering?
The ability to make a difference in somebody's life.
Judy and Woody built their lives around that mission. They followed each other to Pepperdine University in Los Angeles, made plans to get married, and then spent their engagement raising funds to go to Papua New Guinea. They were missionaries, spent years teaching, building roads, and planting churches. One of their financial supporters during that time was San Leandro Church of Christ. Woody and Judy would visit the church on trips back home, tell them how things were going in Papua New Guinea. So when the church needed a new youth and family minister, one of the shepherds, that's what they call leadership at San Leandro Church of Christ, one of the shepherds asked Woody if he wanted the job.
Here I am, 69. I never thought of it being a forever. I just didn't.
I was going to add, it's very unusual for a minister to stay this long at a church.
Yeah.
And people have asked us over the years, how come you guys never went somewhere else?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we never felt called anywhere else.
It wasn't called, no.
And we're not going to go anywhere else until we feel like there's some reason that we're supposed to go. I think a lot of, I shouldn't admit this is a big judgment, but I think sometimes ministers leave because they're escaping the conflicts and the problems. And we felt, you should be leaving because you're being called for a reason to go somewhere else, not to be escaping something.
That type of thing.
So do you, how do you feel about like if the church is a place where people don't necessarily always show up on Sunday, but they're still part of the church?
How do I feel about it? That's the way it is now.
This is Sharon Casaneras.
I'm adjusting to it because I'm still a church-going person. I'm one of those that I'm here every Sunday.
Sharon is 76 years old and grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. Called it the buckle of the Bible Belt.
Everybody went to church. And it's different here on the West Coast. It's just very different. Culture is different. It was hard for me to adjust.
She started coming on short trips to California in the early 80s. She was being courted by the man who would eventually become her husband and trying to get a sense for what life would be like with him on the West Coast. For Sharon, a young woman from the buckle of the Bible Belt, one of the first things she had to do was shop for churches around the Bay Area.
And at that time, my husband wasn't affiliated with any church. It was another reason why I was looking for a special kind of church, because I wanted a church where my husband would feel comfortable coming to. Not like a bunch of stiff-necked people that, were so pious and everything.
Sharon was looking for a bona fide church, but after months of searching, said nothing was really standing out to her. She was starting to lose hope. And then she met a little old lady. Sharon said this woman felt like a grandmother to her. And the little old lady, she told Sharon to go check out San Leandro Church of Christ.
When I came here in 1983, we had about at least 300 people, totally integrated. Every nationality walked through the door, and people were just laughing and kidding around. It was such a positive feeling. And then this may sound corny, but I thought, man, this is the way heaven is going to look.
Even with the pews full up every Sunday, Sharon said the church still had an intimate feel.
It just seemed like it was just genuine love. Even though it was a large congregation at that time, it just kind of grabbed me by the heart.
So at what point did it become clear to you all that things were getting dicey?
Probably for the last 10 years before 2018.
The timeline gets a little muddy here, but bear with me.
I remember when we were, I guess you'd call thriving. So the first wave of people leaving, it was like, oh my God, what is going on?
You just heard Judy say that the church's foundation was starting to show cracks around 2008. But a huge wave of people actually started leaving much earlier. It was the late 90s, and San Leandro Church of Christ was in the middle of a heated debate about one of its members, Tony McKee.
Assigned at birth as female, and then went through the transition, became male. We didn't know him until he was only presenting as male, so we never...
Up to that point, nobody knew that Tony was transgender. He was married to a woman, and it's not like people were really asking questions. But when information about Tony's transition started going around the congregation, Judy said that a lot of folks wanted him out.
There's a lot of controversy, and the shepherds at the time had lots of meetings, consulted lots of people, and said, you know what? Where we're coming down is grace. And it's not for us to judge this or that or the other. And we're accepting him as a fully fledged member. He's not going to be a junior member or restricted or, whatever. So the legalistic folks, or the ones that had, I shouldn't call it, that sounds negative. The ones that had a different view of Scripture and what it was saying left. I guess you'd call it our church split.
The first time Judy and Woody told me this story, they really pointed to it as the defining moment when church membership started to drop off. And in a sense, they were right. About 50 people left after the shepherds decided to retain Tony McKee. And then another 50 slowly trickled out over time. But I don't think that explains why San Leandro Church of Christ is in their current predicament.
But that, to me, that really predates what you were saying was the precipitous decline. That's a pretty clear schism that comes along an issue.
Right.
What happens maybe 10 years later is something different, which is people are just actually not probably going to church.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Because that dropped us down from like the 250 to like, I don't know, 150 maybe. Yeah. But you're right. The 150 down had nothing to do with that.
From 150 down, that was about the big existential thing. The tidal wave that swallowed up churches across America. People losing interest, moving away, getting busy, and finding other ways to spend their time.
Over the years it went down to like 200, then 175, then 150, then 100. And then once it started sliding down from 100 on down, then we were like, wait a sec, we really need to do something.
That takes us back to 2018. Like Judy said, things had gotten really dicey at San Leandro Church of Christ. It was becoming clear that the numbers, they weren't just going to bounce back.
Back in 2018, I was kind of in panic mode, like, we're going to close our doors in 5 years if we don't do something radical, We said, we need to ask the elders if we can have a church consultant to come in, because it's getting down to crunch time now. So I think it was just like...
Sharon remembers that consultant.
How close do you think you all were to actually closing the doors?
It was pretty close. We had someone to come in, and I guess he does church planting and things of that nature. And he was looking at trajectories of churches, and he told us where we were. And I forgot how many years he told us that if we didn't do something, that the doors would be closed.
So how many churches do you think over the course of your career have you done that for?
Oh my goodness. Over the course of my career, it'd be in the thousands.
This is Stan Granberg.
I help churches look into their future.
Stan went to seminary school back in the 80s and was reading a lot of stuff by this old professor, Peter Wagner. And what Peter had done was develop this way of describing a church's health in medical terms. A way to help ministers diagnose the most common diseases that affect a congregation, and how to cure them. That made a lot of sense to Stan, so he came up with his own sort of diagnostic formula, and he made a career out of it. He and his wife Gina, they go into dying churches, evaluate the heart and the lungs and the limbs, and they ask, well, do you think we can save it?
There is a hospice care feel to it at times. You're trying to be careful, you're trying to be gentle, while not ignoring the realities of the situation.
What was your first impression of San Leandro Church of Christ?
Oh my goodness. I went to school with Woody, so I've known him most of my life.
Stan, Woody, and Judy, They all went to the same seminary school in Arkansas, Harding University. And they stayed in touch. They'd meet up every year at a conference outside LA. So when Woody and Judy asked him out to lunch back in 2019, he didn't think much of it.
For them to come with that very explicit intent to say, Stan, we want you to come and to work with us, I did not know that was going to happen.
Stan's been at this a long time, diagnosed thousands of churches, and he says most congregations can't even do the first thing he asks of them.
We ask them for their articles of incorporation and bylaws. Most of them were written 40, 60 years ago. They don't even know where they are.
Then he starts with a few objective questions. What's attendance been like over the last 10 years? How much money have people been giving? Who's on staff?
And we didn't say, oh, you're just going to die and there's nothing to do. We said, given the trajectories, if nothing changes, why should we expect anything different to happen? So my wife and I went into a Saturday with a group that they put together, had about 20 people. And so we started walking them through a process of self-evaluation.
He said, here's the life cycle of a church. Now you guys tell me where you think you are on this life cycle.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, is it kind of one by one, he asks, and most people put us on life support stage. All of us together went through the material and said, here's your metrics, here's your attendance figures, here are your contribution figures, here's the da-da-da-da. Let's just talk about it, put it on the table. Let's just say it out loud, and let's just now deal with it.
Do you remember what those conversations were like?
Yeah, they were very emotional. We had to kind of push the leadership at that time. We had to say, we're not doing enough. We're being lukewarm. We're being lackadaisical.
This was the fork in the road, a major turning point for San Leandro Church of Christ. They had two options: close the doors, sell the building, donate all the money and walk away, or dig in. Reimagine what this place could be.
How did it feel to hear someone else say that?
It was actually relief.
Finally, somebody who's not afraid to tell the truth. Told us what we needed to hear, totally honest, said, hey, you're in this stage and you're going to die. And a few people didn't like hearing that.
I forgot how many years he told us that if we didn't do something, that the doors would be closed. It was fear. We had to push people. I had to be pushed. When you see things going down and you don't know what to do, you almost become paralyzed. We just made a resolve that we are not closing the door because we said there's no other church that we want to go to. And I think it kind of made us mad too. You don't come in here and tell us, you know. We got fired up and said we're going to prove him wrong. It's not going to happen over my dead body.
Woody, Judy, Sharon, and the roughly 20 members of that inner circle, they were resolute. They were not going to sell off their assets, disband the congregation, and spread out across other churches in the Bay Area. And that felt good. They were doubling down on their commitment to one another. But there is a difference between resolve and reality. Now that they'd decided to take a last stand, to keep the doors at San Leandro Church of Christ open, they were left to actually do the work. What can we actually change?
We've had very, very good, candid conversations in that group. And we brought in more people along the way. We realized that fairly early on that we didn't have enough young adult voices. So we invited our young adults to come in because we needed more of their voices. Everything's come out of that.
Do you guys feel like a sense of responsibility for getting more young people into San Leandro Church of Christ?
No.
These are the young adults at San Leandro Church of Christ.
Anybody else have a different answer?
Sometimes.
Okay. Why is that?
Well,
This is Bryn Sandine. Her dad, Brian, is the head pastor.
we have a better chance of getting young people to come to our church than the not young people. But they're the ones who want it really badly. They really lay it on thick, how great it is that we're there because we're young. So sometimes that's a pressure to be like, oh, we got to keep this thing going.
The young adults group meets every Wednesday night at Woody and Judy's place. There's usually 10 of them. When we met up, there were 7. You already know Bryn, plus John,
I'm John Castle,
Natalie,
I'm Natalie Castle.
Angelica,
I'm Angelica Wolf.
Jasmine,
I'm Jasmine Ponder.
Monty,
my name is Monty Bruce,
and Isabella.
Hi, my name is Isabella.
They're all in their 20s, and they've been meeting every Wednesday night for 10 years. The Squares have been hosting these groups for even longer. That's going on 2 decades.
What are some of the things that you all talk about on like a week-to-week basis?
Well, you know, like the politics that have been going around lately. So we talk about politics a lot, social justice issues, what we deal with at work. And when Woody and Judy bring up to us like how we want to change the church or how to get more younger people into our church and how to kind of retain that, because we're going to be the next generation to take over the responsibilities when the people now age out or go somewhere else or retire, whatever.
Before I showed up in San Leandro, I'd reported on 3 other church communities that were figuring out how to survive in America in 2025. Some of them had major financial issues, and all of them are wrestling with the fact that an entire generation just didn't see the appeal of church. That resulted in a bunch of aging congregations trying to get inside the head of a young person. What do these people want? What do they even like? That's complicated, and in some cases, it's not even possible. The kids had moved away, and they weren't coming back. But in San Leandro, the kids were here. And they weren't just here. They were kind of leading the charge. How are we going to get young people in the building? In theory, it'd be easier for them. These are their friends, their peers. They speak the same language. They share the same cultural references.
I'm trying to say this in a way that doesn't sound so nerdy. I want to talk about the real issues that like young people are facing. The real issues in our everyday lives as like we strive to like follow Christ. How do we understand scripture in the context that we currently occupy here in the East Bay area?
When I asked Woody and Judy about how they were evolving, they pointed to the moment after George Floyd was murdered. 20 years ago, maybe even just 10 years ago, their congregation wouldn't have showed up for a Black Lives Matter protest, let alone help organize a demonstration of their own. But that's the cultural context of the East Bay area. It's diverse, it's vocal, it's progressive. So the young adults pushed Woody and Judy and the rest of the congregation to take a stand on social justice issues. Stand up. Get out in the community. From an outside perspective, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. A lot of people were marching in the streets in 2020. But inside the walls of a lot of churches, that was a big deal. And the young adults felt good about it. They were pushing the congregation. They felt represented. But it's also an example of a way they feel stuck.
Where are all the young progressive Christians at? They're like...
In this room.
In this room. Young progressive Christians, people that aren't afraid of saying that they're a Christian because of the reputation that Christians have.
Despite being part of the target demographic, it's really hard for them to talk about this stuff with other young people.
Do you all ever talk to people who are outside of your church community about just like coming with you to a service on Sunday?
Used to talk to my friends about it. They say hell no.
Hell no.
Oh yeah, but like absolutely not. I was like, all right.
I mean, I would have trouble asking someone who doesn't already like is at least Christian and wants to find a church. Like if someone was looking for a church, I'd say like, yeah, come here, but I wouldn't be like, hey, come on, you got to go to church. You got to go to church. Come on, it's Jesus time. Like, let's go. I'm not a fan of that.
But I feel like I haven't heard anybody talk about Jesus yet.
Well, sometimes we don't talk about Jesus at our meetings.
That doesn't like we're ignoring him. He's still part of this. We don't have to actively say his name and talk about the stories and like the Bible in order to be like doing the things that he teaches, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like, one way, and like, not that you guys are here to convert or like grow the flock, but it would just be like, hey, do you want to come hang out?
The conversion aspect of going and trying to like evangelize others, like that's not something that we really feel comfortable with, especially because when I went to like a Christian school, that was like one of the main things I hammered in.
Natalie said this was something that came up in another group meeting.
And it was like, well, going out and like trying to get others, and you're forming these superficial relationships with people where you don't actually care about them. You just care about getting them to church and like saving them or whatever. And so it's like, well, no, like I would want to form a bond with somebody And so I feel like if I were to go up to somebody and be like, oh, like, come to my thing, like, regardless of my actual intention, in my head, I would be like, well, I'm just in this to try to convert them, and I don't want to do that.
I mean, do you guys have any interest in growing this little community of yours?
We are always open to new people, but I do think that we are like a very connected group. I think sometimes it can be hard to get to know us.
Bryn did say that other people have been in and out of the group. One person, she noted, who would have had way more to say about Jesus.
We're a small group at San Leandro Church of Christ, but we have big dreams sometimes. Sometimes our numbers can't catch up to our, like, big goals for ourselves, but we personally, and the Squares, and all of the people in our community, like, put in so much to it. And that allows us to use the, like, Jesus terms, like, bless each other's lives and truly be a supportive community, but you have to, like, kind of buy into it in order to do that.
It's funny you have, like, almost a visceral reaction when you say, like, bless each other's lives. Does it feel weird to say stuff like that?
I just don't. I feel like I don't like to use the Christianese terms, because sometimes they can just be superficial. It's like when someone says thoughts and prayers. That doesn't mean anything when you say that.
Navigating your 20s is tough. You're figuring out how to support yourself financially, how to be an adult, trying to avoid judgment. I sense that was especially true for John and Jasmine and Bryn and the rest of the young adults. In places like the Bay Area, Christianity carries a certain stigma, and that's hard for them to shake. Here's Natalie again.
When you hear about Christianity, most of the time you hear about the bad parts. The people who are, like, spewing hate, but just being like, it's out of love. And so, like, a lot of people see that and just, like, they assume that that's what Christianity is. So that's why, like, I mean, when I see people are hesitant about things, and also, like, I have my reserves because I don't want to be known as somebody like that. I don't want to be labeled as a Christian like that. So it's like, I understand the hesitancy, and I'm not going to push it.
Would you say, I assume you all have social relationships outside of this room. How many of your friends do you think go to church, percentage-wise?
I think that's a big assumption on your part, that I have friends outside of this room.
Fair enough.
I don't know. No clue.
No clue. Okay. Estimations?
Oh, I'm kind of with Bryn. Like, this group and, like, my family and my boyfriend are kind of, like, the only people I really hang out with and talk to. So,
amen.
This is, like, 100% right here, because everyone right here goes to church, so 100% for me.
Like, most people I talk to regularly are in this room, or other friends from games and stuff. Or, I don't know, a few friends from high school. But in terms of people that I, like, consider friends, maybe 30% do go.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of percentages of friends that go to church outside of this group, I'd say somewhere between 0 and 5%.
It was hard not to think that this could feel a little isolating.
I really had ideas for the church and how it could change into something that could get more people in the door, more young people and more diverse people. But I feel like it's too hard. It's something to pray about, but, like, I don't know. Not one person can, like, do everything, you know?
I did ask you if you invited anybody, and you didn't say you had.
I did invite someone, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't really have a lot of friends, so I'm very lonely.
That's something we all say.
That we all say. We have each other.
Yeah.
In Alabama or Arkansas or Mississippi, we might not be having this conversation. There's a chance these young adults would be in the majority, maybe part of an evangelical megachurch, the types of congregations that have become synonymous with Christianity in America. Conservative, white, legalistic, oppose reproductive rights, disapprove of gay marriage. This crew is none of those things. But in the Bay, they're still on an island. That's something Jasmine talked about.
I was going to comment on
Yeah,
another
please.
thing that Bryn had brought up, like when you were saying when you're trying to bring people to church, is it like, hey, let's go to church, let's go to my potluck, come to the Christmas pageant or whatever. Like, I think all of us have done that in some shape or form with family members, with other people that we've met and everything. But I would say, like, we do a lot of the community work, and the people, like, they come and they see us, but sometimes when it comes to like, oh yeah, since you came to this, come to church on Sunday, and some of them are standoffish about it.
Can I ask why you think that is?
I feel like it is a deeper rooted thing that's not going to come in from one conversation with them. Like, Woody and Judy are really good at sticking with somebody and trying to talk with them, see what is really like the root cause of why they're so standoffish about God, about Jesus, about going to a church building and things. It might be like a religious based trauma that they've had. And I feel like that when people don't know God or don't understand like truly who Jesus is, then it's really hard for them to know that the person that hurt them, that is affiliated with the church, that's not God hurting you. That is a human being hurting you.
There's a response I've heard a lot when I tell people about this series. Isn't it a good thing that Christianity is shrinking? I think this is basically Jasmine's point. Institutions are made up of people, and people are liable to do all sorts of bad stuff. And for good reason, we hear a lot about the bad stuff. Like evangelical Christian influencers and lawmakers spewing hateful stuff about immigrants and queer people, and sometimes about anyone who isn't white. To me, that's just a bunch of people co-opting a religious movement for political gain. This certainly isn't something new, but it has made even the idea of Christianity radioactive in so many parts of the country. And a lot of folks I've talked to over the last year, they really struggle with this.
Human beings are all imperfect, and it's a little difficult to just get it in one phrase like, hey, let's go to church. And, you know, it's like a constant discussion that you have to have with that one person for a long time in order for them to be even motivated to step foot into church.
One of the church's main selling points is that it's still a place for people to come when they need things like grief counseling, drug rehabilitation, a hot meal. I'm sure every pastor I talk to would tell you that's a huge part of their mission. They want to provide those things. They need to provide those things. But my sense is that a lot of those people, once those needs are met, they don't necessarily stick around. That's not a judgment on whether or not they should. I just wasn't sure if that would be enough to sustain a place like San Leandro Church of Christ.
There are more and more churches realizing they could do more in the community than they have been doing. They've been thinking that, oh boy, if we built this church and all God wants us to do is show up on Sunday and have all our ministry take place inside these doors. And so the pendulum is swinging the other way. Nah, you got to go outside those doors. Mm-hmm. And you've got to enter other people's doors.
Woody's answer reminded me a lot of how Julian was approaching things in Hyde Park. And they were both pretty sober in their assessments. If we don't go outside the four walls of our church and meet people where they're at, we are going to fail. Woody and Judy and the young adults and the entire congregation have been leaning into this thing. They're going out in the community, asking people what they need, and trying to reflect that. They're now an emergency preparedness center, a place where people in the neighborhood can come when the power goes out or when there's a fire or an earthquake. They're part of neighborhood watch groups. They organize block parties, put on holiday events. These are all new parts of their ministry. It hasn't led to new faces in the pews on Sundays, but Sharon said that even though they're shrunken down to 50, 60 people, those people are totally bought in. The question I kept coming back to, though, is what if the people they're trying to get to come to San Leandro Church of Christ just don't care about God?
There is the very real world part of it, which is that, like, you have to survive. You want people to feel like they want to be a part of the community for those reasons, but you also need them to be a part of the community.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right, Mateo. Mm-hmm. You're right, man. You're right.
And there's that tension.
There's that
right,
tension.
Because are we recruiters for our organization, or are we people who are trying to introduce people to Jesus? Are we both? And when people don't, do we drop them? It's a complicated thing. You know what I'm saying? You're right. We do have to recruit for the church because as older people die off, you got to have new people coming in, or pretty soon we're closing our doors too, right? There's all these motivations. We're trying to be a light for God in the world. We're trying to meet needs in our community because that's what Jesus would do. And then if nobody comes in the door, is it still okay? Or do we change tactics because we got to get more people in the door? It's a constant conversation that we're having.
You haven't asked this question, but yeah, okay, so Woody, Judy, so if people aren't converted, if money's not put in the collection basket, then salaries aren't being paid, bills aren't being paid, the doors close. So then what do you do? I mean, are you still ministering in this community?
I mean, that's my big question when talking to you all about the current situation that you all are exploring, like being a resilience hub and being a place for power if the power goes out. Hot days. But do you feel sad if there's no attachment to the faith that's
I see what you're saying. Yeah, if that does not ever translate into people coming to know God, then are we satisfied with those efforts? Yeah, that's a good question.
That's a very good question.
The aim of our lives is to connect people to God, and show them how much they have a creator who loves them. So when you're doing all these things, if none of that translates into that end goal, was it worth it? And yes and no. It's worth it in the sense of saying, hey, there's the church on the corner actually cared about us. When there was a big earthquake, they let us shelter in there. And then when all the power went off, they let us come in there and charge our computers. The church had a blood drive for us, and they were a polling place. And this church is a nice part of the community. They organize the neighborhood watch. This church has always been trying to help us out. This is great. We love what this church is doing for us as a community. That's valuable in itself. But if none of the people that we're reaching ever realizes that God loves them and they can have a relationship with God, then it didn't reach its ultimate goal, did it?
Okay, so my kind of last question is, do you think that communities can survive without churches?
Boy.
We have friends that attend AA, right? Yeah. Very close-knit communities where they're really real and transparent with each other. They're very supportive of each other. And for a lot of people, that is their substitute for church, right? It performs a really needed function, right? And so if there's other entities that step in, I think that would be a tragedy because God is still there and we're just kind of bypassing him. But in reality, I think communities can survive without churches. I think they're poorer for it, but I don't know. It's a bad answer, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting, that question. Can communities survive without churches? And that's a different than saying, can a community survive without God? All of us would love to be a part of a group where we feel like we're heard, we feel like we're seen, we feel like we're understood, we feel like we're accepted. And you talk about our friend who goes to AA, and that's her church. The one place where everyone walks through the doors and there's no pretense. This is who we are. Take it or leave it. And everyone says, yes, they cheer for you, they embrace you, they hug you, they accept you. And maybe that goes full circle of why some people don't come to church.
Okay, so I think the first thing I wanted to do was to take us way back to spring of 2023 when you actually came up with the seed for this series. How did you come up with that is my first question.
I thought there was a glaring paradox, one that I identified in a book that I wrote 20 years ago, where I said it looked to me like religion would remain a potent, significant cultural and social and political force in American life, even as numerically the number of congregants would be in headlong decline. And that decline has deepened in a way that I couldn't have anticipated in 2005. If you had asked me as I was finishing that book, would it be where it is now in 2025, I would have probably picked a number that was illustrating decline, but not anything as profound as what we're seeing now. Denominations on life support, many, many churches closing, merging, moving. It is really a fascinating thing to watch because it's an important institution in American life, and at the same time, one that is in decline.
I'm trying to square the fact that there was a decline in numbers at the same time that there was an increase in influence. It just seems so unusual.
You're right. It is something that is fascinating to watch in, broadly speaking, a group that is declining as a percentage of the American population. And where that goes, I think it will reach a hard core of people who will doggedly remain involved and hope for better things. I mean, it's in the nature of religious organizations, in any religion, to keep the candles lit, stay ready for new people to be involved. But the idea that religion will disappear, I think, is just a vain hope of the most hostile people who have perhaps been hurt by religion in their lives. But I think we're going to reach a steady state. As I've said in lectures to religious organizations, it may actually be better to find out who's really with you for the long haul as those declines continue. The people that we've spoken to over the course of the series, some of them are deeply involved in that work, keeping the lights on, remaining ready for whatever fate, or as they might say it, whatever God has planned for them. Some of those people will be wrong, and the fight they fight to keep the doors open and keep the lights on will be fought in vain. And some people will succeed because they'll hit rock bottom and then they'll find new ways to be who they are. And that's what's going to come out of this era. My daughter is an ordained person. The weekend of her ordination, we were sitting together and she looked at me and she said, "Who's going to be out there?" Meaning out in the pews. And I said, that's really your job now. I said, you'll spend the rest of your career and the last years of your career making sure that there are people out there, that there still is a church to love you when you need love, to pick you up when you fall down, to talk to you about the rough spots in your life, to celebrate when you've got wonderful things to celebrate, like a life of commitment to somebody else or the arrival of a new child. And the trick now is figuring out what people want, what they need, and how that fits in to what you've already got on board. I mean, she's now in her early 30s. In 30 years, when she's figuring out how to wrap this up, I will probably be no longer around. And certainly it is my wish that religious organizations be around to continue to teach the values and answer some of the questions that people have about life. Why is it so hard to be alive sometimes? Why am I in such pain? Who will share my happiness with me? All the big things that we've looked to each other and looked to religious organizations to help us out with.
Did it ever surprise you that your daughter decided to kind of dedicate her life to the church, that she chose that as a career path?
She was very active in church as a teenager. She happened to be a teenager at a time when very gifted young ministers were working with the youth in my church. And I think they modeled for her and gave her a view of a life that you could be an interesting and happy and fulfilled person and still be a cleric with a collar on. And I think that taught her a big lesson. And like any good father, I tested the idea by trying to talk her out of it. Not because I wanted to talk her out of it, but I wanted to be sure that she was really meant for this work. And everything that she told me indicated that she was. In trying to talk her out of it, I talked to her about the fact that as her father and as a co-leader of the family, I had to take on all the joys and sorrows and challenges, unhappiness, everything among this little family that I was a leader of. And that was sometimes very hard, and that was sometimes a great burden. When your children suffer, you suffer. I said, well, scale that up, and you will share the joys and the sorrows and the unemployment and the early death and the substance abuse and happy marriages and baptisms and all of that for 200 people. So if you have the heart to do it for 200 people, be really aware that that's a part of it. It's a heavy thing. And as a young adult, she said, yeah, I'm ready for that. I can do that. And she does. She's a good pastor, and I'm very proud of her.
You talk about something which I've thought a lot about during the reporting of this series, and maybe it's painfully obvious, but it seems like the people who are coming in through church doors these days are people who are in need, who need something. And it's what I've heard from a lot of pastors, that the value proposition is that we have a way to provide something to you when you're in need. Does that sound like the thing that will get people coming who aren't even really considering being a part of a church or a religious organization?
It's not only need. You're looking around for allies. You're looking around not only for the people who share your ideas about who made the world and why we're here, but also looking for people who share your ideas about what a better place to live would be like, what it would look like. And motivated by our different convictions about the world, we'll share this thing together. If I only work with people who believe exactly as I do to make a better world, then I'm going to be unsuccessful and too often undermanned, because you have to believe what I believe is a subtractive rather than an addition-based way of building community.
Yeah, that is something that we are not societally very good at right now. Do you feel like that's realistic, that people will actually think that way?
Yeah. Well, the reason we didn't do it before is because we didn't have to think about going to a wider set of affiliations and asking for more help in more places. Now you do, and that's forcing not only a kind of creativity and tolerance on the fly, it's also forcing people to think about, well, what is it to be in community with somebody? What is it that we're doing this for?
I'm still wondering if churches kind of meet society where it's at in 2025. Do they have to update the message? How do they meet all the people that are not interested? Like, what do they say to them?
If you go to the churches with 3 and 5 and 10,000 members, they have things going on every day of the week. And when you talk about meeting people where they are, they have young people's groups and theater groups and bowling leagues and young mothers and young parents groups, trying to find the doorway that individual you, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, need and will be what you need and will also be the church. So the church becomes the town square. The church becomes the commercial street where you'll just casually run into people you know and talk to them about what's going on in their life. That doesn't happen, so we're going to create a place where that happens.
We set out to unpack and talk a little bit about what a community loses when a church closes its doors for good. You think a lot about this stuff. What's your take? What does society lose when religious institutions don't exist?
I'm going to take full measure of and make full recognition of the fact that not a small number of Americans are waiting for the day when religious institutions are no longer having the kind of impact that they have on the day-to-day life of the culture. So let's just get that out of the way. A lot of Americans are very happy that religion is in decline because they don't see it as a benign force in our society. If religion were to go away, if we were doing a thought experiment about what America would be like without religion, well, for me personally, as a person who's been congregationally affiliated all of my life, I would not want to see that day come to America, but I can understand why many Americans would. So, I think it will never disappear, and it will never, in this country, get down to the kind of percentages that you see in Nordic Europe, for instance. But it is going to be a less influential institution in society, and it will have to fight for its space in the public square instead of simply assuming or commanding its presence there, which it did in a lot of our history. So if the church has to be smarter and more strategic and think harder about how to justify its place in the big dialogues in society, that's probably better for everybody. That means a better pitch from the church and one that is more relevant to all parts of society if it wants to be heard. And that might not be the worst thing.
Yeah. The last folks I talked to at San Leandro Church of Christ, they are doing some of those things that you're talking about, which is being smarter or recognizing that they don't command the power that they used to. So I mentioned this before, they're now an emergency preparedness center. They are thinking more about how they can be spaces for recreation and childcare. One thing that I think about is that starts to make the theological, the God part of it, less critical to the message or less central maybe to the message.
I'll bet they would say, in answer to that question, instead of just talking about Jesus, we're being Jesus. And I bet you dollars to donuts that would be part of their answer, even though I wasn't with you when you went to San Leandro. I'm sure that's what this church is up to and how they explain what they're doing to themselves. Not just a question of membership, not just a question of getting subsidy for being an emergency preparedness shelter that helps them keep the doors open because money is fungible, but also a place where you live out the values that you express in what you teach, what you preach, and what you practice.
You're right. But they also did say that if God isn't a part of it, they feel like they are also not doing their mission. But it did strike me as it still has to be part of, and maybe it seems so obvious, but as someone who's not religious myself, it doesn't seem as obvious perhaps, which is that how many generations of emergency preparedness center do you go down to the point where something like being a community center is more recognizable than the fact that you're a church? I don't know if that makes sense, if that's too hypothetical.
Oh, no. I think that's a critical part of this whole conversation. If you are an organization that is, at its core, making a certain proposition about how we got here and why we're here, and it motivates everything that you do you have to keep reminding yourself that that's why you exist? Because there are other organizations that could probably do emergency preparedness just as well and are probably even arguably set up for it in a better way because they weren't built as a church. So you have to think about both mission and motivation. I travel around the country and I talk to religious organizations about some of these topics. And I say, look, the thing that you don't want to be is a feeding center, a nutrition center that's also a nice people's club. You know, you don't want to be a child literacy center that also gets together to pray on Sunday. You do this for specific reasons. You do these ministries because of what you think about the world. And if everybody understands that, that's fine. This is why we do this. As my old pastor used to say, what does God want from us? He wants us to be holy. And if that's the way you get to holiness, by helping others, that's the way you'll do it. These are 21st century conversations. This is not something you had to worry about as much 100 years ago, where everybody working in your religious organization, Catholic Charities, Lutheran Social Services, whatever, was like you, Catholic or a Lutheran, and therefore very similar reasons to your own. So yeah, you know, that part of it is changing. But I think people do recognize that the place I'm doing this thing is a church. And the reason they're doing it is for churchy reasons.
The final service was made possible with generous support from the Henry Luce Foundation and is distributed by PRX. It was written and produced by me, Mateo Schimpf, with additional writing and reporting from Ray Suarez. I also engineered and mixed the series. My editor and executive producer is Jared Sport. Music is from Blue Dot Sessions.